Welcome to the Health Fix podcast, where health junkies get their weekly fix of tips, tools, and techniques to have limitless energy, sharp minds, and fit physiques for life. Hey, health junkies. On this episode of the Health Fix podcast, I'm interviewing Dr. Jaquel Patterson. She's a naturopathic doctor just like me. She also holds an MBA, and she's a nationally recognized leader in naturopathic and functional medicine, as well as an educator for integrative healthcare providers. Now, she's the president right now of the Naturopathic Medical Association, so that's really fun too. Now, she's trained thousands of physicians worldwide in functional and integrative medicine. She's a sought-after speaker. She's a 3-time Amazon best-selling author. We'll talk about her books today on the podcast. And first and foremost, she is the founder and owner of Fairfield Family Health. Now, this is a practice where she's got a team of docs that work with her in Connecticut, and they are seeing all kinds of different folks. But in particular, she specializes in Lyme and autoimmune conditions. And today we're going to be talking about how she approaches Lyme disease and just things to be thinking about. If you have Lyme, you want to get tested, you're wondering, are your symptoms maybe Lyme? This is also a great podcast for you. We're going to be talking about gene silencing therapy, something called SOT. We're going to talk a little bit about ozone, and we're also going to be talking about some other therapies that are interesting and new in Dr. Jaquel's practice. All right, let's introduce you to Dr. Jaquel Patterson. Dr. Jaquel Patterson, welcome to the Health Fix podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and really looking forward to this discussion today.
Well, anytime I have the chance to have a fellow naturopath on, I've got to geek out a little bit because, that's what we do. We got to see, what are you up to? What's happening? All that stuff. So one of the things that really drew me to you and was like, oh my gosh, I really want you to come on the podcast is because you have quite the history of talking about Lyme, talking about long COVID, a lot of things that folks right now are starting to really wake up to and be like, okay, could this be my thing? Could this be something that's going down? So I would love for you to talk a little bit about your own journey with Lyme and how you kind of were like, oh, this could be Lyme, or if you knew it was Lyme right away, and then kind of help folks to really see what could they be thinking about? And then maybe they're blaming it on hormones. Maybe they're blaming it on perimenopause, but maybe it's actually Lyme showing up.
And that's why I love with the discussions when you're saying fellow naturopathic doctor is that I think with us, I always say we're kind of ahead of the curve. We do these things and we have these interests or research that's 20 years before it becomes the in thing. And so one is infections. We've been talking about even the role of infections and autoimmune conditions. It's becoming more looked at. And I think COVID just pushed it along further. But these were all things that have been, as NDs, we look at the whole person. So we're always looking at what factors can play into influencing someone's health or their health trajectory. So my personal story was that ND, I was around 28 years of age when I graduated from naturopathic school. But the reason I'm saying all that was that at that time in that last couple years is when I first got Lyme disease. And also what I think I had it because that was where all my symptoms began. So I started having a lot of symptoms of fatigue, joint pain. And I remembered when I was in school being out studying outside and I had a bite on my leg. And they couldn't figure out what happened because they thought it was just a spider bite. And so when I look at my pattern 6 months after I started having joint pain, a lot of fatigue, I could just fall asleep anywhere. Brain fog, I had hot flashes. I forgot that was one of my big symptoms. And I was in the clinic and we in our fourth year, and you know this well, we have to wear our white jacket to differentiate fourth year from third year. And I would be so drenched that literally walking from one room all the way to basically the front, I would be literally drenched. So I would have to put tissues in the bathroom and stuff my clothes because it would go through it. And I didn't even realize until 3 years looking back that I was wearing dark clothes for a good 2 years because of this this adjustment. And so when I'd go, the reason saying all the thing with my age is at that age, and what I see with a lot of my patients that are in their 20s, and especially women, you just get kind of you get ignored in care. So it was oh, it's because you're anxious. And I was yeah, but I'm not anxious. I'm grocery shopping and I'm drenched, or I'm doing things that don't cause anxiety and I'm completely drenched. I was having sleep issues, just all of these symptoms that didn't match up. So just like my patients and a lot of the people that see NDs, I went to 7 or 8 doctors. I went to rheumatologists. I went to primary care, and it was kind of like there was really nothing conclusive. The only thing they found was an autoimmune marker ANA that was positive, but I also have family history of lupus, my mom, my aunts. So they had to just keep track of, was it going that route? And so what happened was, fast forward, I started doing a lot of, actually lifestyle stuff and just, taking better care of my health, herbal medicine, et cetera. It wasn't until I started working with patients and that had Lyme disease. And I'm like, wait a second, I have all these symptoms. I was like, after like, I have all these symptoms. I had all these symptoms too. And I checked and mine were all active. It was Lyme, Babesia, then later I had like Bartonella. And so I started treating myself for it, but part of it helped to inform me when I was working with patients because they were coming in with the same things like, oh, it's in your head, or not being able to explain symptoms, even after being on like psychiatric medications and all these things with no symptomatic improvement. And for me, it would have went down the road of like, oh, we just think you might be in the early phases of an autoimmune condition. And then after helping with those infections and seeing like all those symptoms and even my autoimmune markers going down. So that was one thing. And then when I got COVID, we started at our office. I started because of that. I feel like I always worked with autoimmune conditions, then infections, and more of a focus on Lyme disease. I got COVID in 2020 early on in the time of getting it. And at the time, I just happened to run, like every 6 months, I would run like my markers. I just happened to, like a few weeks before, check for Lyme disease, and all those were past infections, check for like mono, all those things were past. I got COVID, and then 3 weeks later, I did pretty well with it. I felt like I was going back to the same symptoms I had before, like when I had Lyme disease, when I had mono. I rechecked my blood work, and everything turned on. It went from like IgG to IgM. And it was as though I just got all those infections. And then I started also having patients come in that I hadn't seen in years. And they were like, I think I have Lyme again. Like I got COVID. And then now all of these symptoms started coming up the same, and we test. And so because of that, that propelled me to go forward with writing the book Long COVID on Beyond and Beyond. And it was basically about like what markers to check for. Can other infections have triggered up? I saw people's autoimmune markers go up. Iron and ferritin change. So I really did that based on like my own experience early on of seeing all of these like shifts in infections. And so that kind of, yeah, it took me to where I am. But it's like, I think with any ND or anybody in this space of like integrative medicine, we have our own personal journey and story or family story. But each thing, it's like I've learned pieces along the way. And even my other book I wrote, I was bored during COVID and I came out with like 2 books in like 2020, 21 was Women in Lyme. And the reason I wrote that was for the same reason, because of my own personal experience and because a lot of the women I had, if you look at the stats, you see that the people, like 80% that have continued Lyme symptoms are women. And also women's understanding of like pain is seen differently in medicine. Women are told like it's just anxiety or it's in their head or you're stressed. And so I felt like I needed to write a book specific to that because there wasn't anything about that. Also how hormones affect us differently with like inflammation, with mental health. And so that's what like really pushed me forward to write the Women in Lyme book based on my own personal experience dealing with it. And then patients coming in all the time and seeing those changes when they were menstruating or perimenopausal and seeing that shift. That wasn't really a conversation in the Lyme world, that they weren't really talking about hormones and can that play a role, or even cortisol, your adrenal glands. It was just about the infection, maybe stuff about supporting your immune system, but not about like that full picture approach of like what other factors can make the disease condition worse.
Oh my gosh. You've said like so many things that I'm like, yes, I see this. And I think a lot of people, they will think, like you said, it's Lyme's back. And it's like, well, maybe,
Mhm.
this intersection between the nervous system, the immune system, and what you've had in terms of exposures from Lyme to
Mhm.
Epstein-Barr to COVID. It seems like I'm now seeing for a lot of people, every virus that they get almost throws them back
Oh, yeah.
in if they're not balanced.
Yeah, 100%. And then also you'll see, as you're seeing with women, like we're looking at hormone replacement therapy, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, getting a lot more managed. Like there's neuroreceptors, immune receptors for all of those hormones. So if that is not working optimally, there's going to be an impact on their mental health. There's going to be impact on inflammation. There's going to be their impact on like this cascade of events that results as part of it. So I think it's easy when you have not easy when you have one disease condition, then you kind of just go down one piece, but with the way we're trained and how we do, it's like, okay, what are all the other reasons? Like why? And that's what happened. Like I was like, well, why? My patients would say, I feel like 1 week a month. That's how it kind of started. Like 1 week a month or 2 weeks, I'm not good. And then I'm like, okay, that doesn't make sense. So it was hormones, like why would someone be really, why do some people are sick? They have the same number of bands. Their husband will have it or vice versa, and they're completely fine. And then another person, it's not. And each person makes it harder for us to see patients this way, but each person has their own individual story. So it's not always, one size fits all. So that's the other piece. So each person's story is uniquely different.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I keep trying to say over and over again, like nothing's cookie cutter.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing, when we look at like the different cases and what someone's experiencing, it's like a lot of people will be like, Dr. Janine, Dr. Jaquel, what is your protocol for Lyme? Or what is your protocol for this or that? And it's like, well, there's multiple flavors of that. So I am curious because I love to pick brains of other NDs in terms of your guys's like base, let's call it base protocol that you build off of. And I want to talk about the SOT big time in a couple of minutes. But what would be like your guys' base protocol? What kind of things? It sounds like, you're addressing if someone needs hormones, we're addressing that. You're addressing the nervous system, you're addressing the immune system. And then a lot of people want to know, and then of course I do too, what kind of products are you using for addressing the actual infections? Like what's your
Gotcha.
favorite companies? Like what kind of jams do you guys have in that
Oh, yes,
department?
and I can actually say the companies I like. So a
Yes.
couple of them, Lyme Core is one, and we usually will do a combination of herbs. So if you look at the studies on PubMed, some of the ones most known for Lyme is Artemisia annua, not Absinthe. So Absinthe that they use for like parasites particularly. So Artemisia annua. Cryptolepsis is one, Scutellaria bicalensis, and Japanese knotweed. So those are like 4 key herbs that have been studied. You can see tons of literature on it for actually several different co-infections too, like Babesia and Bartonella and Anaplasma. So Lyme Core has those. My favorite go-to are Nutrimetics. So 2 of the key ones, they actually have a rotation of herbs they have over every, I think, 4 to 6 weeks. We kind of at our office use like a core one. I even created like a kit particular to that. So the ones I often use is Cemento and Banderol, two of the key like introductory ones. The other ones I like are Kumanda, Hudatunya. I always say it sounds like Lion King, like Hudatunya. Like everyone says it a different way, but that one's also used for like Mycoplasma and Bartonella. So some of my key companies like Nutrimetics, Lyme Core, but people do like Beyond Balance is one because they're in glycerites, which are more like a sweet flavor. And then Buhner herbs. Another thing I do, which is a little different, we're trained, there's only a couple hundred practitioners trained in something called low-dose immunotherapy. So low-dose immunotherapy is actually based on really isopathy, but it's dead or irradiated protein of that, of Lyme disease. And the concept is that it allows for what's called antigen acceptance. So it's not like increasing or suppressing. It's actually saying, hey, I have it and I'm not reacting to it. Like I'm seeing it there, but I'm not having an overreaction. So the people I've seen it work the best for are my patients with a chronic Lyme. They've been dealing with it for like 20 years because at the end of the day, it's like what I said, like, why do you have the infection and Dr. Krause has it and I'm still reacting to this 20 years later and Dr. Krause was fine after 4 months. So in my opinion, it's because the body, it's like an autoimmune condition where it's just like continuing to have this reaction that it doesn't have to have. And so what low-dose immunotherapy is great is in like neutralizing it so your body's not continuing to have this overactive response. And so it balances what's called Th2. It's part of your immune function. And so you could be dominant one way versus the other when it's like more autoimmune or there's like an infection, what they call like stealth pathogens. So I love that. So that's one. And then we're starting to do a lot of like other therapies, like IV therapy. We still do NAD is one people are using, ozone therapy, methylene blue. So one of the pieces with Lyme disease or infections, mitochondria is something you really have to support because these infections like eat away, like they take away from the mitochondria. So what that means is that's like your energy center. So mitochondria is for your energy center. So these chronic infections, you need more of it. So you need like the CoQ10s, the NAD, which is going to be a lot stronger, the ozone. If you look at methylene blue, that helps with the mitochondria. So all of those things are always important when we're looking at anti-aging, but even more vitally important when we're working with somebody with like Lyme disease because there's going to be a deficit. So that's the first thing we're looking at. Like supporting what you said, like dietarily. So it's like antioxidant and support for the mitochondria. And then the other thing are going to be herbs that are antimicrobial, but that also are helping with the immune modulation. And then a lot of the patients I have too, we always have to do some support for the gut because the patients we see oftentimes they've been on antibiotics for years. So I am often seeing the people that have been on it for 5 or 10 years and no one's ever done like a stool test for them and have seen like what other infections can relate. So we're doing tons of like gut health and kind of helping to re-establish that based on like their history. So it is a combination of when we first come in, we as you said, there's no cookie cutter approach. We're seeing what their history is. We're looking at antimicrobials. We might have to have them like antibiotics, but we're also looking at those supportive therapies that are going to help to increase their ability to kind of get over the illness faster and thrive. My goal, I always say to patients, is to have you like graduate or is to not see you again. It's like, I love you, but like, I don't want to see you, like I want to see that you're gone and you're healthy and thriving and not needing to be on something forever. And that's what I love. I know you do a lot in like biohacking with some of these, they're like longer term where they last longer rather than something they're taking like every day. So that's ultimately the goal whenever we're working with any patient.
Absolutely. I know, right? I would love to see you out at the park or out,
Exactly.
walking around or at a restaurant or something versus, hanging out in my office all the time. And it's chronic illness is hard. It is
Yeah.
hard to work with this. And I'm curious, what do you guys do, you and your staff to help you take care of yourselves
Mm.
while
So
working?
yeah, so we have so in terms of taking care, so there are a lot of studies. So we do have the cool thing is we moved into a new building, built out a building. One of the biggest built out our space, and one of the biggest things I wanted to have was wellness of things that are also supportive. So because of that, we fully built out more of like our IV therapy suite, where we're also doing ozone therapy. So a lot of people know of like EBOO, or you can start with just the ozone. That basically what it does is it takes out your blood, oxygenates it, and infuses it back into your system. And there's certain number of times typically people do before. Some people, my patients, they'll feel great from just the first treatment, but most people are doing like at least a handful of treatments. And so what I wanted to build was these other, NAD, where we're having one of our providers that you can do like injections, or that you can actually do it through IV. So I wanted to build other stuff for people to do outside of just like coming in as for appointments. So we did that. We also added a far infrared sauna. We also have like cold laser we do, and then also red light therapy. And those red light therapies help with like cellular repair, mitochondria, regeneration. Sauna, if you look at, there's tons of studies on its impact on decreasing inflammatory markers like CRP, particularly, which is really helpful for Lyme disease. So most patients, if we start with like one, like you said, like one general supportive thing we can do, if they can afford it, is definitely like the sauna for 15 or 20 minutes, because what happens is it helps to decrease inflammation. It helps with sweating and detox. There's usually an issue with that. And oftentimes it's hard because people with Lyme disease or tick-borne infections, they might be limited with like, they can't exercise the same way they did before because they don't feel well. There's many different reasons for that, but something like a sauna allows their system they just feel a lot better without pushing their system as much as like a really strenuous exercise. Other than that, we start doing the basic stuff of like walking and activity. But yeah, I've had some patients that have been marathon runners, have done Ironman, and they'll tell me like, I can't even run. They got Lyme disease. Like, I can't even run a couple of blocks now. And I used to do marathons. So those are the people where like just getting back into being outside and walking, or sauna, which has definitely will help the disease condition, are really great.
There's definitely like so many things to choose from, right? So a lot of people
Mhm.
are like, oh my God, where do I start? So it's great that you were like sauna. If you could do sauna,
Is one thing, yes.
step one, step in there, definitely get in there. Now let's talk a little bit about gene silencing because I've never talked about it on
Mhm.
the podcast. And I think a lot of people are like, okay, gene silencing, SOT, what is
What
this?
is that?
So tell us a little more about that so we can educate folks on that a little.
Yeah, so we have a therapy at our office. It's called SOT, oligonucleotide therapy, and they actually have studied it for research for cancer. Actually, initially was cancer therapies, and now they do it for viruses. And so that includes like EBV, and also they do it for bacteria and also in things tick-borne infections like Lyme disease. And so what it does with gene silencing is they actually take your blood and you first have to test. So let's say I'm positive for Borrelia burgdorferi, which is what most people know for Lyme disease. Your blood gets sent out, it gets analyzed, and what they're doing is they're actually looking for that in your blood, the Borrelia burgdorferi. And they create basically what they call like a therapy that allows, it's called gene silencing. So it basically stops that stop sequence. So it prevents the replication. So it's great for people. Basically, then it gets infused back into your blood. And so what I've seen is people have tried everything like antibiotics treatment, that this has been effective. And the studies have shown it. And the studies, they have had above 80% effectiveness.
Wow.
So the great thing about it is it's something that it's like one time, and some people have to do it a few times. Overall, you can only do it a few times in a year, but that they don't have to be on what we talked about, antibiotics every day, or they don't have to be on a ton of herbs and supplements every day. When it works, it really does help people. But they have initially used it for like cancer therapies. And so the reason it's funny, it's like I said with like Lyme disease and I don't know if you notice this too, Dr. Krause, like a lot of the reason I start looking into things is because patients come with it. So it's like, peptides, people are saying, so I'm like, okay, I got to research, what is this? What is it about this? So the same thing was with SOT, was our patients were coming in and they were asking about it because they were going to like places all over the country. Like, oh, we're going to Georgia for it. Oh, we're going to New Hampshire, and we're in Connecticut and no one is doing it. So I was like, okay, we should offer it at least for our patients that are actually asking for it, because they're accessing that in a lot of different locations. So it is one thing, and we've been doing it. We've seen some really good results so far from the patients that have done it, but it's definitely a different type of a therapy service to offer for Lyme treatment, and it's getting
Okay.
more traction, as being known.
Okay. And so like the testing for it, is it like for Lyme, are you using like IGeneX? Like, are you
Yep, so
using?
we do IGeneX, Vibrant. So I use both. I used to do also medical diagnostic labs. Typically, medical diagnostic labs will only look at like a couple infections. It used to be different before, so it's mostly like Lyme disease. But IGeneX will do, Vibrant does like a full panel as well. And sometimes we'll do, the good thing with Vibrant is what they're looking for is like the very specific subspecies. So you're going to look at like Bartonella, like Quintana, or Bartonella henselae, and some labs will just say or it'll say, yeah, so that's a lot less specific. So they're looking for very specific ones to find in the blood. So that's like how specific it is. So I like Vibrant for that reason. The great thing I like with IGeneX, and well, also Vibrant too, is that they also do what's called like PCR testing. So for some patients, if you're immunosuppressed, you might not show, if you look at the conventional labs, and the reason we're talking about these specialty labs, conventional labs like Quest or LabCorp, are like 58 false negative if you look at the studies. So a lot of people, it's more likely to be false negative than positive. And even though they have the symptoms, and per CDC, it's still a clinical diagnosis. You're not supposed to base it purely on the lab test result. So these other labs, I mentioned like IGeneX and Vibrant, they're like Lyme literate and medical diagnostics, meaning they might show, all the numbers that are going to show in terms of like a Western blot. They're not going to just do the ELISA test. They're going to do like a PCR test. So some people don't produce enough antibodies, but they might do well in finding like the DNA. And so like 15% of people get missed with just that alone. So these tests are going to be a lot more more accurate, and the specificity, when you look at it, and specificities are like above like 98% for some of them. So they're better in that regard if you suspect that someone has Lyme disease.
Good to know. Good to know. I think that
Yeah.
helps a lot because, yeah, I spend a lot of time being like, I don't think we should get the LabCorp or the class
Mhm.
if we really want the answers. So it's one of those things, right? You're like, well, if you're gonna, I mean, it's some money, but it's worth it.
It's worth
So
it, especially if you haven't had answers. The people, so I might do, like you said, like LabCorp requests initially, but if like it was just usually people coming into our office, they've went to many doctors. So they've already done those tests. And so that's when you're like, okay, if I'm done those and I still don't feel well and I'm not moving the needle forward with how I'm feeling, and I've gotten other treatments, you really want to look at those specialty tests so you can be sure to rule out things that you may or may not believe you have.
makes sense. Makes sense. And let's talk about your clinic for a little bit because you were saying you've expanded. You have people coming in. People are probably coming from all over to
Yes.
visit you
Yeah.
guys. How does that look?
Yeah, so we have patient, it's interesting, like 50% of my patients aren't even in Connecticut. And I think it's because we're so specialized. One thing that we've done is I'm known for like Lyme disease and infections and also like integrative psychiatry. I do a lot with mental health, and that kind of all folded in together with infections. Pans and pandas is another thing I do. And then hormones ends up coming in there somewhere, like it always ends up folding over. But then other doctors in our office have like one focuses on SIBO. We have one that focuses on oncology, like naturopathic oncology. We have one that focuses on like bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. So it's been great because we have a team. We built out, there's 9 doctors. One does like allergies. They do sublingual immunotherapy so it's an alternative to getting allergy shots. And so what's great is we have this team that we wanted to make it almost like a one-stop. So if I see someone and I'm working with someone, they start having like more serious like SIBO, I might say, okay, for the next 3 months, you're going to see Dr. Pierre. You're going to see Dr. Hernandez for that. They have, let's say, allergies and eczema. I might say, okay, I'm going to have you see, Dr. Pritchard for that for this period of time. So it's really been great because we all as NDs can do everything, as you know, and ultimately any disease condition you do, if it's eczema, you're still going to affect everything. But there's a difference in like that nuance of like really deep diving specialty in a certain area. So that's the great thing about having the team. Plus we've had like, I built it out. One of the big things to me, it's 4,200 square feet. So we built that out, but we took over the building, which is 9,000 square feet. So pretty big. Was that we built like a conference room with the full like video capability. We have a podcast room that we set up, basically a media room that we set up. And it's like a hangout room. It looks like a speakeasy.
Hmm.
So that's like for video recording, like YouTube's. The conference room ultimately was so that we can we're starting to do like recorded webinars and live webinars for patients because that's what they've said they wanted education on. We set up back area to be able to do at night, like yoga classes, meditation classes. And then we have like the other room eventually getting like a hyperbaric and such. So one of the biggest things for us that I think, and like equally in health, is people feeling like listened to and heard. And we wanted to make sure we had a space that created that like even down to all the colors with the design. And when I knew we got it right was when we first started the contractor, some of them said, I don't know about this space. Like, I feel like you would want to hang out too long. Like several of them said, like, it's a little too relaxing. And I was like, yes, we got it. Because that was exactly what our goal was. Like, how do we make it? Because we were in a house before. And a house people said, I feel like I'm entering your house. I feel cozy. We wanted people to come in. I think that's a thing we do in this space as NDs. Like, you want to come in and feel like I'm supported. Because I feel like I always say that's like half of their health is like you're coming in and you finally say something and somebody actually believes and listens to you. People don't realize how much of baggage you carry on because of that when you don't feel well. And so it's just like that piece is really important down to like how we actually even set up our space. But we do a lot still with telemedicine, but we're offering, we do have people fly in. We have people travel from far. We have the most other common states we're in Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, and Jersey. So people will come in a few hours and they really love coming in. But it's funny, I also have people that are 5 minutes away that still do video conference because, the way the world is, everything's about time. So, but we want to make sure people feel that not even if they come in, but also just in booking their appointment. They love speaking to our patient coordinator, clinic director, and that experience all the way, from the beginning to end, and how we even, how they get the supplements, the speed in it. We want people to feel like it's like they were in the office, even if they were in here. So all of that was like really important with every single thing we do.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
And I mean, in this day and age, having all of it as a team, I like it. It's kind of like the Mayo of naturopathic medicine for chronic illness, having everything right there and
Mhm.
having that personal touch, because yes, I agree. That is one thing that is definitely like ingrained in us naturopaths, like make
Mhm.
everyone feel comfortable, have everybody come in and just feel like it's their place that they can hang out. So that's
Exactly.
huge.
That's what I think is special you can't explain it. We get it because I think we've had our own ways and walks of life of how we've come into medicine in the first place. And that's what we learned from like day one of being in school. So,
Well, I'm excited if I'm out in Connecticut one of these days. I definitely want to pop by and see what you guys are
oh, for
up
sure.
to. And we want to make sure that folks know how they can find you, where they can find you, how they can get a hold of your books and learn more from you and all of the things. I'm like, wow, you've got like webinars, you got all this stuff. I'm like, share
How do
with
we
us
get
how
this? Yes.
folks can interact
Yes.
with you more.
Yes, our practice is Fairfield Family Health. You can follow us at Instagram, Facebook. Instagram and Facebook, and also LinkedIn at Fairfield Family Health. I also, in terms of my books, Amazon are on Amazon, Women in Lyme, also Long COVID and Beyond. And we're opening up a satellite clinic soon in New Hampshire. It's like 20 minutes outside of Boston. I'm trying to slow down because we just moved into this a year and a half ago. So I just like expanding, because I think also it's equally important as people seeing like a different care. Like that was part of what we always say, like healthcare as it should be. Like this is one of the reasons why we didn't change our name to like integrative, or it was just like Fairfield and we've had that question, and the reason is because we feel like it should be part of how care is. It shouldn't be like,
Right.
oh, this is a different kind of thing. This is just how it should be in terms of everything and how we do the operation. So yeah, I'd love for you guys to follow me. Also YouTube, I released a YouTube recently, and that is Dr. Jaquel Patterson, and prepping up at some point this year for a TED Talk. So I had to get my YouTube active. So I'd love for you guys to follow me there to see kind of my journey along the way too.
My goodness. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today. I know you've got a little one to go run to, so I appreciate your time, and I can't wait to put this one out and share it with folks. I think they're going to learn a lot about all the different options out there for what they can do if they have Lyme or any other chronic illness. So thank you so much, Jaquel, for coming on.
Yes, thank you for having me again, Janine, too.
Hey, Health Junkies, before you go, I want to tell you about my upcoming workshop, March 18th, 2026. It's at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 7:30 p.m. Central. And like I mentioned, the end of 2025, I started to talk about me taking things to the next level with my health and my fitness. And I'm looking in 2026 to have some folks join me with this. If you've been thinking about getting out on adventures, traveling, doing some awesome things while you're traveling, or maybe you're wondering how you can stay in your sport or hobby, or even try something new at any age, but maybe you're thinking, am I up for this physically? Can I handle it? What about mentally? Can I still push? Can I still drive through hard things? Well, my next workshop has you covered. It's called The Art of Staying in Your Sport or Hobby and Being Adventure Ready at Any Age, so that you don't question if you can do something. It's when you can do it. So that's the theme of my March 18th workshop. In the workshop, we'll be talking about how blending the principles of Chinese medicine, self-body work, and the power of peptides and hormone balancing, whether it's herbal or bioidenticals. These can all help you to have all-day energy, a sharp mind, and a pain-free, lean body without handfuls of supplements, strict diets, and all day in the gym. So if this sounds like you and where you're at in life, come join me. And if you can't make it, there's always replays available when you register. The link to register is in my podcast notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, it's below. I hope to see you there. Have a great day, whatever you're doing. Hey, fellow health junkie, thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening.